Nebraska Extension plant pathologist Tamra Jackson-Ziems says several Nebraska counties have confirmed at least one case of southern rust. Tamra says cornfields in parts of the state are also experiencing other issues such as gray leaf spot and physoderma brown spot. To learn more about scouting and treatment recommendations for each, we talked with Tamra Tuesday afternoon near Columbus, Nebraska.
Well, we've confirmed southern rust in more than 10 counties in the eastern half of the state so far, and I want to make sure people understand that counties where we've confirmed it, it doesn't mean the whole county has the disease, nor where counties have not had it confirmed does that not mean that it's there. And so it's important that people are watching for it and paying special attention to fields that might be vulnerable to damage.
Tell me about the timing of its appearance this year in the state.
Well, having it diagnosed as early as the last week of July like it was is important, but it mainly is important relative to the stage of the crop and where corn is at. And so that will give us an indication of the potential for yield loss. I'm mainly concerned about fields that have maybe were very late planted or replanted that might be earlier in their development and have greater yield loss because of it if it develops there.
What weather conditions would be favorable for its spread?
These warm, humid conditions are perfect for that particular fungus, and especially temperatures that may linger in the 80s, whether that's in the daytime or the nighttime, overcast conditions and very humid conditions, whether we feel that way or not, it's more humid in that canopy, and that's important for us to remember too.
What are the defining characteristics of southern rust and then the other common rust?
Well, southern rust has more of a yellowish or a tan spore, and so it may look orange too, and so that gives it a little bit different appearance than common rust that's more of a brick brown to a red color. But unless they're side by side, color might be a little unreliable. And so I would look to see where the spores are produced and how large those pustules are. Southern rust mainly going to be on the top leaf surface. They'll rub off with your fingers. And on the bottom of the leaf, you could see a few southern rust pustules eventually, but common rust is mainly able to sporulate there.
What are the differences in how those two affect the plant in terms of whether or not you need to treat for them?
Well, southern rust is a much more aggressive pathogen, and so it can reproduce quickly, and we have much less resistance in our commercially available dent corn hybrids for southern rust. Whereas in common rust, we have some natural resistance in most of our hybrids, and we tend to not worry too much about common rust, and that's why it's important for us to tell them apart.
What about the treatment for southern rust?
Well, our foliar fungicides do a very good job controlling southern rust. It impacts the severity of the disease and also reduces the chance of lodging and standability problems later on at harvest. And so they'll have to weigh that with the stage of their crop and how much southern rust is beginning to develop and monitor that closely in their fields.
We'll switch gears. Let's talk about gray leaf spot. How prevalent is it?
Well, we've begun to see gray leaf spot now for 2 or 3 weeks in several parts of the state. Now, that's usually a very common disease for us, and it's important that people look specifically for the very characteristic rectangular gray lesions starting in the lower canopy. The margins of those lesions are smooth and straight, and that's in contrast to a lot of other diseases.
Do you need to manage it?
That will depend on hybrid susceptibility and some other high risk factors like continuous corn or minimum till. And so I would watch to see how high on the plant that disease is moving and how much leaf area you've got. And as it approaches the ear leaf, just know that you've probably got leaves affected 1 or 2 above that.
All right, physoderma.
Well, physoderma is not usually a problem. You know, in Iowa, we've seen some examples where it's caused some stalk breaking and weakening around the nodes. And so on the leaves, you'll notice physoderma can develop either in bands or it can cover entire leaves, but those lesions look different depending on whether they're on the blade or in the midrib, and the spores don't rub off. And so it can be misleading because they are yellow and it might confuse people with southern rust.
Treatment necessary?
Not really.
And to close out with Gossa's wilt and northern cornleaf blight, what's the update on those two?
Well, we haven't seen much Gossa's wilt this year, and that might be maybe because we've had less hail widespread in the state. That one's bacterial, of course. Northern cornleaf blight, also fungal like gray leaf spot. I've seen less of that this year, but that might be because it's favored by the cool, damp conditions. And now that we're warmer, we might see less of it overall.